The coffee had gone cold again, but Dr. Elena Vasquez barely noticed as she stared at the cascade of data streaming across her holographic displays. At 3 in the morning, Kepler station felt like a ghost ship drifting through the void, its skeleton crew of 12 spread across monitoring stations that never slept. The Deep Space Array continued its eternal vigil, sifting through cosmic background radiation for patterns that might suggest intelligence among the stars. Still chasing digital windmills, Elena? Jake Morrison's voice crackled through the comm system from the communications bay 2 decks below. You know, normal people sleep at night. I hear it's all the rage on Earth these days. Elena rubbed her eyes and leaned back in her chair, the synthetic leather creaking in protest. Normal people don't get paid to eavesdrop on the universe, Jake. Besides, sleep is overrated when you're potentially on the verge of the greatest discovery in human history. Right, and I'm potentially on the verge of winning the lottery. Doesn't mean I'm quitting my day job. Jake's chuckle filtered through the static. What's got you so worked up this time? Please tell me it's not another pulsar that you think is sending us the galactic equivalent of a dinner invitation. She almost dismissed it herself, another false positive in an ocean of cosmic noise. The signal appeared as a barely perceptible deviation in the quantum flux readings, buried so deep in the background radiation that the station's AI had flagged it as a statistical anomaly. But Elena had learned to trust her instincts over the past 5 years monitoring the Kepler array. Something about the pattern felt different. Jake, can you run a harmonic analysis on Sector 77 Alpha? I'm seeing something weird in the quantum resonance bands. Define weird. Are we talking mildly interesting data fluctuation weird, or pack your bags because we're about to be famous weird? Elena's fingers danced across the holographic interface, isolating the signal and running it through a series of filters. The numbers that emerged made her breath catch. Mathematical sequences embedded within the quantum static, prime numbers arranged in ascending order, followed by the Fibonacci sequence, then something that looked suspiciously like pi calculated to 37 decimal places. Jake, you need to see this. Now. 20 minutes later, Jake emerged from the lift clutching a steaming mug of synthol coffee, his dark hair sticking up at improbable angles. Despite working the night shift for 3 years, he never seemed to fully adjust to the disrupted circadian rhythms. Okay, show me what's got you channeling your inner conspiracy theorist. Elena gestured to the main display, where the isolated signal pulsed in brilliant blue against the star field. Look at the mathematical progression. This isn't random. Someone, or something, is deliberately embedding these sequences in quantum background radiation. Jake squinted at the data, his expression shifting from skepticism to interest. Well, I'll be damned. That's either the universe's strangest coincidence, or we've got ourselves a genuine hello from the neighbors. He paused, taking a sip of coffee. Though knowing our luck, it's probably just a really elaborate spam message. Greetings, carbon-based life forms. Have we got a deal for you on extended Starship warranties? Despite the tension building in her chest, Elena couldn't help but smile. Your cynicism is noted and appreciated. But look at this. She manipulated the display, revealing deeper layers of the transmission. The signal contains biological data. Genetic sequences that don't match anything in Earth's databases. Jake's humor faltered as he leaned closer to examine the scrolling code. That's impossible. How could anyone transmit genetic information through quantum fluctuations? The energy requirements alone would be astronomical. Unless they're using biotechnology we can't even imagine. Jake, this transmission is coming from the Vega sector. Remember those energy signatures the probes detected 6 months ago? The ones that made the xenobiology department practically wet themselves with excitement. Yeah, I remember. Command decided they were probably just stellar phenomena. Jake's voice had grown serious. Elena, if you're right about this, I know what it means. Elena's hands trembled slightly as she enhanced the signal clarity. Someone out there is in trouble. Real trouble. This isn't just a greeting, it's a distress call embedded with biological imperatives. They're not just asking for help, they're trying to preserve something. The implications hung heavy in the recycled air of the monitoring station. First contact protocols existed in theory, but nobody had seriously expected to use them. Humanity had been reaching toward the stars for centuries, always hoping and simultaneously dreading the moment when the stars reached back. Jake set down his coffee mug with deliberate care. We need to wake up Commander Torres. Already working on it. Elena's fingers flew across the interface, preparing a comprehensive data package. Jake, what if we're the only ones who can help them? What if we're too late? Hey, none of that doom and gloom thinking. We're communication specialists, not galactic social workers. Our job is to listen and report. Let the big brains figure out what to do next. But even as he spoke, Jake was already running additional signal analyses, his usual levity replaced by focused intensity. The door to the monitoring station hissed open, revealing Commander Torres in a hastily donned uniform, her gray hair pulled back in a regulation bun despite the early hour. This better be good, Vasquez. I was having the most wonderful dream about retirement. Elena straightened in her chair. Commander, we've detected an artificial signal containing mathematical sequences and biological data from the Vega sector. The transmission appears to be a distress call of unknown origin. Torres studied the data displays with the practiced eye of a career military officer who had spent decades hoping for and dreading exactly this moment. After several long minutes, she turned back to Elena. How certain are you that this is artificial? 97%, Commander. The mathematical progressions are too precise for natural phenomena, and the biological data. Elena hesitated. It's like nothing we've ever seen, but it's definitely genetic information. Well, Torres said dryly, I suppose retirement will have to wait. Jake, prep a priority transmission to Earth Command. Elena, I want every scrap of data you can extract from this signal. And people? She paused at the doorway. Nobody talks about this until we know what we're dealing with. The last thing we need is panic spreading through the station. As the commander's footsteps faded down the corridor, Jake turned to Elena with a grim smile. You know what this means, don't you? That we might be about to make first contact with an alien species. That, and we're probably going to need a lot more coffee. The Aurora's engines hummed with barely contained energy as Captain Sarah Chin guided the reconnaissance ship through the final approach to the Vega system. 3 weeks had passed since Elena's discovery at Kepler Station, 3 weeks of frantic preparation and heated debates at Earth Command about the wisdom of investigating an unknown alien signal. In the end, scientific curiosity had won over military caution, though Chen suspected the decision had more to do with humanity's desperate need for technological advancement than any noble pursuit of knowledge. Captain, we're picking up some seriously bizarre readings from the fourth planet's orbital zone, reported Lieutenant Torres from the sensor station. The young officer's voice carried a mixture of excitement and nervousness that Chen found oddly reassuring. At least someone on this mission still had healthy survival instincts. Elena Vasquez floated near the main view screen, her magnetic boots keeping her anchored to the deck plating. The xenolinguist had insisted on joining the mission, despite having zero experience with space travel beyond the rotating habitat of Kepler Station. The signal's getting stronger. Whatever's transmitting is definitely artificial, and it's big. Jake Morrison, who had somehow convinced Earth Command that his communications expertise was essential to the mission, drifted past carrying a tablet displaying incomprehensible data streams. Define big. Are we talking impressively large space station, big, or, holy crap, they built a moon, big? Chen activated the long-range visual sensors, and the view screen shimmered to life with an image that made everyone on the bridge fall silent. Orbiting the dying red dwarf of Vega hung a structure that defied easy categorization. It stretched nearly 50 kilometers from end to end, its surface pulsing with bioluminescent patterns that seemed to follow some organic rhythm. The hull appeared to be grown rather than built, with flowing curves and branching protrusions that reminded Chen of deep-sea corals or the neural networks of a vast brain. "Well," Jake said finally, "that's definitely in the holy crap category." Dr. Fletcher, the mission's xenobiologist, pushed away from his workstation with barely contained enthusiasm. The elderly scientist had spent his entire career studying theoretical alien life, and the prospect of encountering the real thing had left him practically vibrating with excitement. "The biosignatures are incredible. That entire structure is alive, or at least partially biological. It's using some form of controlled fusion reaction as a power source, but the energy distribution patterns suggest organic neural pathways rather than mechanical conduits." Chen had commanded enough deep space missions to know when her crew was getting ahead of themselves. "All right, everyone take a breath. We're here to investigate, not to throw a first contact party. Torres, run a full spectrum analysis. I want to know if that thing is armed before we get any closer." "Captain," Elena called from her position near the communications array, "I'm detecting multiple transmission sources from the habitat. The main signal we tracked from Kepler station, but also dozens of weaker broadcasts. They're using quantum entanglement for data transfer, but the signal degradation suggests most of the transmitters are failing." Jake floated over to peer at Elena's displays. "Failing how? Equipment breakdown or something more serious?" "I can't tell yet, but the power signatures are dropping steadily. Whatever's happening over there, it's been going on for a while." Chen made the decision that would change everything. "We're going aboard. Fletcher, Elena, Jake. You're with me on the away team. Torres, maintain position and keep the engines warm. If this goes sideways, I want to be able to leave in a hurry." 30 minutes later, Chen found herself floating through an airlock that seemed more like the mouth of some vast organism than a mechanical interface. The Aurora's shuttle had docked with what appeared to be a reception port, though the organic architecture made it impossible to tell if they were entering a ship, a space station, or some entirely new category of structure. The interior corridors pulsed with the same bioluminescent patterns they had observed from outside, providing a soft blue-green illumination that reminded Chen of phosphorescent algae. The air was breathable, according to their sensors, though it carried an oddly sweet scent that made Jake wrinkle his nose. "Anyone else getting serious aquarium vibes from this place?" he whispered, his voice echoing strangely in the curved passages. "I keep expecting to see little plastic divers and tiny treasure chests." Elena ran her tricorder along the walls, marveling at the readings. The entire structure is one massive biocomputer. The walls aren't just alive, they're thinking. Processing information, storing data, maintaining life support. It's like we're walking through the inside of a brain. Fletcher was practically bouncing in the low gravity, his scientific instruments recording everything. "The biotechnology here is centuries beyond anything we've achieved. Maybe millennia. Look at these cellular matrices. They're using quantum coherence at room temperature to maintain computational states. It's impossible by our current understanding of physics." They followed the main corridor deeper into the habitat, passing branching passages that led to chambers filled with equipment they couldn't begin to understand. Some rooms contained what looked like gardens, with plants that seemed to be made of crystallized light. Others housed pools of luminescent liquid that responded to their presence by brightening and dimming in complex patterns. "Is it just me," Jake asked, "or does it feel like this place is watching us?" Chen was about to respond when they rounded a corner and found themselves in a vast central chamber that took their breath away. The space stretched upward for hundreds of meters, filled with towering structures that looked like a fusion of organic growth and advanced technology. Streams of data flowed through transparent tubes like glowing rivers, feeding into nodes that pulsed with activity. At the center of it all, connected to the massive biocomputer network by dozens of fiber-optic tendrils, was a figure that made Chen's hand instinctively move toward her sidearm. She looked human, startlingly so. Her proportions, her facial structure, even her long dark hair floating in the zero gravity all seemed perfectly familiar. But her ears curved back from her head in elegant points, and her skin held a faint luminescence that matched the habitat's glow. The alien woman's eyes opened, revealing irises the color of deep space, and she spoke in a voice that carried harmonics their universal translators struggled to process. "I have been waiting for you," she said, and Chen realized they were no longer just explorers. They had become witnesses to something far more desperate and beautiful than they had ever imagined. Jake, ever the optimist, raised his hand in what he hoped was a universal greeting. "Hi there. Don't suppose you've got any coffee? It's been a really long trip." For the first time in what might have been years, the last member of her species almost smiled. Lyra detached herself from the neural interface with fluid grace, the bio-optic tendrils retracting into the walls like shy sea anemones. Captain Chen noticed that despite being connected to life support for what must have been an extended period, the alien woman moved with perfect coordination, her muscles showing no signs of atrophy. "Your species learns quickly," Lyra said, her voice carrying that strange harmonic quality that made the universal translator hiccup occasionally. Most visitors would have fled by now. Jake couldn't help himself. "Well, we're either very brave or very stupid. The jury's still out on which." Elena stepped forward, her scientific curiosity overriding protocol. "You've been alone here. For how long?" "3 of your standard years, 2 months, 16 days. Lyra's precision was unsettling. "I have maintained careful records. Time becomes fluid when you are the last." Dar. Fletcher was scanning everything within range, his instruments practically singing with readings. "The biotechnology here is extraordinary. How do you interface directly with the habitat systems?" Lyra touched one of her elongated ears, and Chen noticed tiny bioluminescent patterns flickering along the cartilage. "We are born connected. The Kithra and our living ships have shared consciousness for millennia. What you call technology, we call partnership." "Kithra," Elena repeated, testing the word. "That's your species name?" "Was. I am what remains." Lyra gestured to the vast chamber around them, and the walls pulsed in response to her movement. "This is the sanctuary, our last genetic archive. Every Kithra who ever lived, their memories, their knowledge, their biological essence, all preserved here." The weight of that statement settled over the human crew like a shroud. Chen had seen enough death in her military career to recognize the particular kind of grief that came from being the sole survivor. Jake, sensing the mood darkening, tried his usual approach. "So this is basically the galaxy's most advanced library card, and you're the only librarian left. That's got to be murder on your social life." Instead of offense, Lyra showed what might have been amusement. "Your companion uses humor to deflect discomfort. This is a survival mechanism my people also employed, though perhaps more subtly." "Great, I've been psychoanalyzed by an alien," Jake muttered. "My therapist is going to have a field day with this." Elena moved closer to one of the data streams, watching the flowing patterns of light. "Lyra, what happened to your people?" "The distress signal we detected, it mentioned a plague." The bioluminescent patterns on Lyra's skin dimmed, and the habitat seemed to respond to her emotional state, the walls pulsing more slowly. "Not a plague. A weapon. Engineered specifically to target Kithra genetics and our symbiotic relationship with our biotechnology." Fletcher looked up from his scanner. "Engineered? By whom?" "We called them the Silence. They appeared without warning in the Helix Nebula, spreading death through biological warfare. Worlds that had thrived for thousands of years fell within months. The weapon was elegant in its cruelty. It turned our greatest strength, our biological integration, into our weakness." Chen's military instincts were screaming warnings. "Are they still out there? These Silence?" "Unknown. After the last Kithra worlds fell, they simply vanished. Perhaps they moved to other targets, or perhaps they achieved their goal and retreated to wherever they came from." Lyra's expression grew distant. "I have been monitoring galactic communications, searching for any sign of them." Your species caught my attention because you show promise for biological adaptation. Okay, that's either incredibly flattering or deeply disturbing, Jake said. I'm hoping for flattering, but my experience suggests otherwise. Lyra activated something that looked like a holographic projector made of living crystal. Images began flowing through the air around them, beautiful worlds with organic cities that grew like coral reefs, Kithra beings working alongside creatures that defied classification, children with the same pointed ears learning to commune with living starships. This was Kithra civilization. We did not conquer worlds, we gardened them. Every planet we touched became more alive, more beautiful. Our biotechnology could heal dead worlds, bring life to sterile moons, create ecosystems that sustain themselves for millennia. Elena watched the images with growing wonder. It's incredible. You achieved perfect harmony between technology and biology. And now it dies with me. Lyra's voice carried a weight that made even Jake fall silent. Unless. The word hung in the air like a challenge. Chen had been a military officer long enough to recognize the moment when a mission changed from observation to participation. Unless what? Elena asked softly. Lyra turned to face them directly, and Chen saw something desperate and determined in her alien features. Your species has genetic diversity that reminds me of the early Kithra. Adaptability, creativity, the potential for biological enhancement. I have studied your transmissions, your literature, your science. Humans dream of reaching the stars, but you lack the tools to truly thrive among them. Fletcher was nodding excitedly. Our biotechnology is primitive compared to this. If we could learn even a fraction of what you know. I am not offering to teach you, Lyra said quietly. I am offering something far more significant. A partnership that could preserve the Kithra genetic line while advancing your species beyond your current limitations. The implications of her words hit Elena first. You're talking about hybridization. Cross-species reproduction. I am talking about survival. Mine and potentially yours. The silence may return, and when they do, biological weapons like the one that destroyed my people will seem primitive by comparison. But Kithra-human hybrids might possess resistances that neither species could develop alone. Jake whistled softly. Well, that escalated quickly. I was expecting maybe some cultural exchange, a few recipes, possibly a trade agreement. Not a proposal for interspecies, procreation, Fletcher supplied helpfully. And from a genetic standpoint, it's fascinating. The compatibility markers would need to be extraordinary for this to even be theoretically possible. They are. Lyra gestured, and the holographic display shifted to show complex genetic charts. Kithra and human DNA share surprising commonalities. Whether through parallel evolution or some ancient connection, the potential for viable offspring exists. Chen felt the weight of command pressing down on her. This was so far beyond first contact protocols that the manual might as well have been written in crayon. Lyra, what exactly are you proposing? The last Kithra looked at each of them in turn, and Chen saw both hope and desperation in her alien eyes. I am proposing to preserve my people's legacy through partnership with yours. To create children who carry the best of both species, who might survive what is coming and help your people reach their true potential among the stars. The silence stretched for long moments, broken only by the soft pulsing of the habitat's biological systems. Finally, Jake spoke up. So, just to be clear, you're asking one of us to help you save your entire species through what is essentially the galaxy's most important blind date. If that is how you choose to understand it, Lyra replied gravely, then yes. Elena looked around at her crewmates, seeing her own mixture of fascination and terror reflected in their faces. They had come looking for the source of an alien signal and found something far more complex and dangerous than anyone had imagined. We need to contact Earth, Chen said finally. This decision is way above our pay grade. Time is not a luxury we possess, Lyra said, and as if summoned by her words, alarm tones began echoing through the habitat. The sanctuary's biological systems are failing. I estimate perhaps weeks before total collapse. Well, Jake said with forced lightness, I guess that's what they call a deadline. Dr. James Fletcher arrived on the Aurora 3 days after Chen's emergency transmission to Earth Command, carrying with him a medical bay's worth of genetic sequencing equipment and an enthusiasm that bordered on manic. Elena watched him float through the airlock like a kid on Christmas morning, his gray beard practically vibrating with excitement. Where is she? Where's our extraterrestrial colleague? Fletcher's voice echoed through the ship's corridors as he propelled himself toward the main laboratory with impressive speed for a 70-year-old scientist. Jake intercepted him before he could crash into a bulkhead. Easy there, document. She's still aboard the Habitat. Turns out aliens don't particularly enjoy being poked and prodded by strange humans with medical instruments. Who knew? Nonsense. Any advanced species would understand the scientific necessity of genetic compatibility testing. Fletcher's eyes gleamed with the fervor of a researcher who had spent his entire career theorizing about something that was now floating just a few hundred meters away. Do you realize what this means for xenobiology? For human evolution? For our understanding of life itself? Elena guided Fletcher toward the observation lounge where they had set up a communications link with Lyra. She's agreed to share genetic samples and demonstrate some of her people's biotechnology. But Doc, she's the last of her species. Try to remember that this isn't just a research opportunity, it's a funeral. Right, yes, of course. Appropriate solemnity. Scientific professionalism. Fletcher straightened his lab coat and attempted to compose himself, an effort that lasted approximately 15 seconds before his excitement bubbled over again. But Elena, the preliminary genetic data you've transmitted is extraordinary. The compatibility markers suggest not just possible hybridization, but enhanced hybrid vigor. The offspring could potentially surpass both parent species in terms of longevity, disease resistance, and cognitive capability. The main screen flickered to life, revealing Lyra in the sanctuary's central chamber. Over the past few days, Elena had noticed the alien woman's increasing pallor, though whether from stress, grief, or the Habitat's failing life support systems remained unclear. Dr. Fletcher, Lyra's harmonically complex voice filled the lounge. I have prepared the genetic samples you requested. However, I believe a demonstration of Kithera biotechnology would be more instructive than simple data analysis. Fletcher practically pressed his nose against the screen. What kind of demonstration? Lyra raised her hand, and Elena watched in fascination as the alien woman's palm began to glow with soft bioluminescence. Our cellular structure allows for rapid healing and tissue regeneration. Observe. Without hesitation, Lyra drew a sharp edge across her forearm, opening a cut that would have required medical attention for any human. Instead of bleeding, the wound sealed itself within seconds, leaving unblemished skin behind. Incredible. Fletcher was frantically taking notes. Accelerated healing factor, possibly through controlled stem cell activation. What other enhancements do your people possess? Enhanced sensory perception, improved cognitive processing through bioneural interfaces, resistance to radiation and toxins, extended lifespan averaging 400 Earth years. Lyra paused, and Elena caught a hint of sadness in her expression. All useless against the silence's biological weapon. Jake floated nearby, munching on a protein bar with studied casualness. So let me get this straight. You're offering to share genetic material that could make humans smarter, tougher, and longer-lived, and all we have to do is help you make some babies. This seems like the kind of deal where we should be reading the fine print very carefully. The fine print, as you call it, is more complex than simple reproduction, Lyra replied. Kithera procreation involves neurological bonding that shares memories, experiences, and genetic templates. The process creates not just offspring, but a permanent psychic connection between partners. Elena felt something flutter in her chest at those words, though she couldn't quite identify the emotion. Psychic connection. Our nervous systems would become partially integrated. Not a loss of individual identity, but an expansion of consciousness that includes aspects of both partners' minds. Lyra's alien features softened. It is how my people ensured that love, rather than mere biology, guided our reproduction. Fletcher was practically bouncing in the low gravity. Fascinating. A biological basis for emotional bonding that goes beyond human pair bonding mechanisms. The neurological implications alone could revolutionize our understanding of consciousness. Doc, Jake said dryly, you're talking about cosmic marriage, not a research project. Though I have to admit, till death do us part takes on a whole new meaning when you're potentially living for 4 centuries. Elena found herself speaking before she realized the words were forming. What would happen to the children? Would they be more human or more Kithra? They would be something new, Lyra answered. The genetic modeling suggests offspring who could survive in environments hostile to both parent species, with cognitive abilities that surpass current human limits while retaining the adaptability that makes your species remarkable. Fletcher was nodding enthusiastically. Hybrid vigor on an unprecedented scale. These children could be humanity's first step toward becoming a truly spacefaring species. Or, Jake added with his usual skepticism, they could be really confused teenagers with pointed ears and abandonment issues. Has anyone considered the psychological impact of being the first generation of human-alien hybrids? Lyra's expression grew thoughtful. An excellent point. Kithra children are raised by the community, with genetic memories providing cultural context. Human Kithra hybrids would need new traditions, new support structures. Elena felt drawn into the conversation despite her scientific training urging caution. You've been alone for 3 years. Don't you want companionship for its own sake, not just for genetic preservation? I have been alone since my people died, Lyra corrected gently. Companionship, as you call it, is a luxury I ceased to expect. But if it comes with purpose, with hope for the future, then perhaps loneliness can transform into something meaningful. Fletcher cleared his throat, clearly eager to return to practical matters. The technical challenges are significant but not insurmountable. We would need to establish compatibility not just at the genetic level, but neurologically and biochemically. The bonding process you described would require careful preparation. How careful? Elena asked, surprised by her own interest in the details. The neural integration occurs gradually over several weeks, Lyra explained. First emotional resonance, then shared memories, finally complete psychic bonding. The process can be halted at any stage if incompatibility develops. Jake whistled softly. So it's like the galaxy's most intense first date, followed by the galaxy's most permanent relationship. No pressure there. Elena found herself studying Lyra's face on the screen, trying to read emotions and features that were almost human but not quite. The alien woman carried herself with dignity despite her desperate circumstances, and Elena admired that strength. There's something else, Lyra continued. The genetic archives contain more than just Kithra biological data. We preserved the scientific knowledge of 17 different species, including biotechnology that could transform human medicine, agriculture, and space travel. Fletcher's eyes lit up. You're talking about a repository of galactic knowledge. Technologies that could advance human civilization by millennia. Consider it a dowry, Lyra said, and Elena thought she detected the alien equivalent of humor in her tone. Though I should warn you, some of the archived species no longer exist. The silence has been active in this galaxy for longer than we initially realized. The weight of that revelation settled over the human crew like a cold blanket. Elena realized they weren't just dealing with the preservation of one species, but potentially with humanity's future survival in a galaxy that contained threats they couldn't yet imagine. Well, Jake said finally, I guess the question becomes, are we ready to become the galaxy's newest blended family? Elena looked around at her crewmates, seeing her own mixture of fear and fascination reflected in their faces. The decision that lay ahead would change not just their lives, but the entire trajectory of human evolution. We need more time to consider this, she said, though part of her wondered if they had that luxury. Time, Lyra replied softly, is the one resource I cannot offer. The sanctuary's biological systems are failing faster than anticipated. We have perhaps 10 days before total collapse. Fletcher leaned forward intently. What would you need from us? Hypothetically speaking. One volunteer, Lyra answered simply. Someone willing to undergo the bonding process and help me preserve the best of both our species for whatever challenges await among the stars. Elena felt every eye in the room turn toward her, and realized that somewhere in the past few days, she had already begun making her choice. Elena's hands trembled as she sealed the final genetic compatibility report and transmitted it to Earth Command. 3 days of testing had confirmed what Fletcher's initial scan suggested: she was not just compatible with Lyra's biology, but remarkably so. The probability matrices showed success rates that bordered on miraculous, as if evolution itself had been preparing for this moment across millions of years. Still time to back out, Jake said from the laboratory doorway, though his usual levity was tempered with genuine concern. I mean, Earth Command could always send someone more qualified. Maybe someone with actual xenobiology training, or at least someone who doesn't get motion sickness in zero gravity. Elena looked up from the genetic sequencer, managing a weak smile. Thanks for the vote of confidence. Besides, who's more qualified than someone who's spent the last 5 years listening for alien signals? I practically willed this situation into existence. Fletcher bustled around the lab, preparing the neural interface equipment that would monitor the bonding process. His excitement had evolved into focused professionalism, though Elena caught him muttering calculations under his breath like a prayer. The preliminary neurological scans are fascinating. Your brain chemistry already shows resonance patterns similar to Kithaeron neural structures. It's as if you're naturally predisposed for the bonding process. Great, Elena said dryly. I always suspected I was genetically programmed to fall for aliens with pointed ears. My mother's going to love this. Captain Chen entered the lab carrying a secure transmission pad, her expression unreadable. Earth Command's response just came through. They're authorizing the procedure, but they want continuous monitoring and the option to abort if anything goes wrong. Define wrong, Jake said. Because I'm pretty sure we're already well into uncharted territory on the weirdness scale. Elena took the transmission pad and scrolled through the official authorization. Buried in the military jargon and scientific protocols, she found a personal message from the Xenolinguistics department wishing her luck and promising to name a research chair after her if she survived. The gesture was touching in its complete lack of confidence. Elena, Lyra's voice emanated from the communications array, carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate directly with Elena's nervous system. The sanctuary's biological systems have stabilized temporarily. We have perhaps 18 hours before the next cascade failure. No pressure there, Jake muttered. Just the survival of an entire species and possibly the future of human evolution. Good thing Elena works well under deadlines. Elena found herself laughing despite the enormity of what lay ahead. Over the past week, she had discovered that Jake's humor wasn't just deflection. It was a form of courage, a way of maintaining humanity in the face of the impossible. You know what? I spent my entire career hoping to make contact with alien intelligence. Turns out the universe has a sense of irony. Fletcher looked up from his equipment. All neural monitoring systems are operational. The quantum entanglement communicators are synchronized between the Aurora and the Sanctuary. We'll be able to track every aspect of the bonding process. Elena made her way to the airlock, pausing to look back at her crewmates. These people had become family over the course of their mission, bound together by shared wonder and terror. If this goes wrong... It won't, Chen interrupted firmly. And if it does, we'll figure out how to fix it. That's what humans do, we improvise, adapt, and complain about the circumstances while we're saving the day. Jake floated over and offered Elena an awkward zero-gravity hug. For what it's worth, I think you're either incredibly brave or completely insane. Possibly both. But if anyone can pull off the galaxy's first interspecies romance, it's you. The shuttle ride to the sanctuary felt like both an eternity and an instant. Elena spent the time reviewing Kithra cultural files that Lyra had transmitted, trying to understand the emotional and psychological frameworks that would guide the bonding process. The alien concepts of shared consciousness and genetic memory challenged every assumption about individual identity that Elena had ever held. Lyra waited for her in the sanctuary's central chamber, surrounded by the pulsing bio-optical networks that maintained the vast genetic archive. The alien woman had changed in subtle ways over the past week, her bioluminescent patterns had grown brighter, and she moved with increased energy despite the habitat's failing systems. "You came," Lyra said, and Elena heard relief in her harmonically complex voice. "Well, I figured it was either this or go back to monitoring cosmic background radiation for the rest of my career. This seemed more interesting." Lyra's expression shifted into what Elena had learned to recognize as the Kithra equivalent of amusement. "Your species' tendency toward understatement is remarkable. You are about to become the first human to bond with an alien consciousness, and you describe it as interesting." Elena approached the neural interface that would initiate the bonding process. The bio-optical tendrils looked somehow less alien now, more like extensions of Lyra herself than separate technology. "To be honest, I'm terrified. But I'm also curious, and in my experience, curiosity usually wins out over fear." "Fear is appropriate," Lyra replied softly. "What we are attempting has never been done between species. But the genetic modeling suggests our consciousness patterns are compatible, and the neural resonance tests indicate strong potential for successful integration." Elena settled into the organic chair that had grown from the chamber floor, allowing the bio-optical interfaces to make contact with her nervous system. The sensation was unlike anything she had experienced, not painful, but profoundly alien, as if her thoughts were suddenly echoing in a larger space. "I can feel you," Elena whispered, her voice carrying new harmonics that resonated with Lyra's speech patterns. "And I can feel you," Lyra replied, moving to her own interface station. "Your thoughts are colorful, full of questions and hope and determination. Very human." The bonding process unfolded gradually over the following hours. Elena experienced flashes of Lyra's memories. The beauty of Kithra worlds before the silence came, the desperate loneliness of being the last survivor, the fragile hope that had sustained her through 3 years of solitude. In return, she felt Lyra experiencing human emotions and memories, sharing Elena's wonder at discovering the alien signal and her growing affection for the last Kithra. "This is either the most romantic thing ever," Elena thought, surprised to realize that Lyra could hear her thoughts, or the most elaborate alien seduction technique in galactic history. Lyra's mental laughter was like music in Elena's mind. "If it is seduction, then I am equally seduced. Your species' capacity for hope in the face of uncertainty is remarkable." As the neural integration deepened, Elena began to understand the true scope of what they were creating. The bonding wasn't just about preserving the Kithra genetic line. It was about synthesizing 2 different approaches to consciousness, creating something that could think and feel in ways neither species could achieve alone. "Fletcher's going to be insufferable about this," Elena thought. "He's probably already planning his Nobel Prize acceptance speech. And Jake will make jokes about our children having daddy issues when they realize their father is an entire species," Lyra added, and Elena realized they were already thinking in harmony. The final phase of bonding brought with it the sharing of genetic templates and the biological changes that would allow them to create viable offspring. Elena felt her cellular structure shifting subtly, adapting to accommodate Kithra genetics while retaining human adaptability. "It's done," Lyra whispered, both aloud and through their newly established mental link. "We are bonded." Elena opened her eyes, when had she closed them? And found herself looking at Lyra with enhanced perception that revealed the subtle bioluminescent patterns in her skin and the complex emotional states they represented. More importantly, she no longer felt alone in her own mind. Lyra's presence was there, not overwhelming her thoughts but harmonizing with them. "How do you feel?" Fletcher's voice crackled through the communication system. Different, Elena replied, surprised by the new harmonic undertones in her voice. But still me. Just, more. Over the following days, as they prepared to evacuate the sanctuary's genetic archives to the Aurora, Elena discovered the full implications of their bonding. She could access Kithra memories stretching back generations, understanding biotechnology that humanity wouldn't develop for centuries. More importantly, she could feel the first stirrings of new life growing within her, children who would carry the best of both species. So, Jake said as they transferred the final data archives to human storage systems, any word on what we're going to call the kids? Because half-human, half-alien hybrid babies doesn't exactly roll off the tongue. Elena and Lyra exchanged a look that conveyed entire conversations through their shared consciousness. We were thinking of calling them the bridge, Elena said finally. Between what we were and what we're becoming. Fletcher was practically vibrating with excitement as he catalogued the technological treasures hidden in the Kithra archives. This changes everything. Medical technology that can regrow organs, agricultural systems that can terraform dead worlds, starship designs that use biological computers for faster-than-light travel. And most importantly, Chen added, reviewing the long-range sensor data, defensive technologies that might protect us if the silence returns. Elena felt Lyra's agreement through their bond, along with a complex mixture of hope and determination. The Kithra were gone, but their legacy would continue through the children growing within her and the knowledge they had shared with humanity. You know what the best part is? Jake said as they prepared to depart the dying habitat. Elena started this mission listening for alien signals, and she ended up becoming one herself. Elena laughed, the sound carrying both human warmth and Kithra harmonics. She had come to the stars looking for signs of intelligence and found instead love, purpose, and the beginning of something entirely new. As the Aurora's engines powered up for the journey home, she could feel her children's consciousness beginning to stir, carrying within them the promise of a future where humanity would never again face the universe alone. Through their bond, Lyra shared Elena's contentment while adding her own sense of completion. The last Kithra was no longer the last, and humanity's reach toward the stars had gained new strength. The future, whatever it might bring, would be faced together.